Now we're told that the Sturzhauw is nothing but a cut that starts as a high cut and then plunges over forward with the point, okay? So this is how we should begin practicing it. Start in a high guard like Roth or Tag. We begin with a high cut and then we just let the point plunge over. We begin in our high guard, start our high cut, let my point plunge over. And for this purpose, it doesn't matter whether I'm going, which direction I'm going, this way or this way, okay? So I can go to crossed or uncrossed hands with that. So from a high guard, Roth then, deliver that in. From the high guard, high cut, and deliver that in. So you should begin your Roth or high strike, get it out, and particularly get the strong of the sword out, and then turn your point in. Okay? Out and turn my point in. Cutting out and turn my point in. Now that is the Sturzhauw, the plunge cut, because it is plunging over above. And we can practice this also from a whole part of other guards. So we can practice this from our low guards as well. Pushing that pommel and throwing that point over. Pushing that pommel and throwing that point over. Now, so from our low guard, from our high guard. And the first thing that this is useful for is if we have an opponent that is sort of just in range and allows us to get our blow in between us and then go over their attack with our thrust, okay, with our point, okay. So if I see my opponents here, my sword's down, I don't look like I'm necessarily a threat yet, I simply push my pommel in, okay, and throw that forward. Okay, and that is either to go directly over their defense or to provoke them to parry so you can hit them somewhere else. Okay, I'm gonna stick that out. Stick that out. So get yourself a target, practice making those plunging cuts in towards your target over and over, okay? And remember, they should go directly. You need to get the cut out forward. Doesn't matter actually what cut in the end you're doing. You need to get cut out forward and then you bring your high thrust over the top. You need to make sure that cut comes out and then that point goes directly in towards the target. Okay, so we've done the first use of the Sturzhauw against our opponent. It's to overrun them with our initial blow, okay? The most common one, however, is going to simply be to come into the guard of ox, where Meyer talks about coming into the ox via the plunge, which means that plunging over motion. It's his most common way of getting in position between his opponent, of getting his sword in between his opponent and him as he's engaging. Okay, so my opponent is over here. I'm going to imagine they're an upper right guard. Okay, I'm going to simply put my point over in the plunge. Okay, and then I can immediately follow through with my attack. Okay, or I could do it the other way. So this is going to, if they were up in the upper quarter, this is going to cut them off more directly. I could either finish that with the thrust, okay, if they are not ready for me, or I could strike around with my cut. Cool. And that's something we should be practicing on a target really regularly, okay? For my guard, I'm going to go over through the plunge and hit. I'm going to go over through the plunge and strike into my target with a blow. Plunge, hit. Plunge, hit. Now obviously the first point of what this is useful for is defensively. Okay, so I am getting my point out between me and my opponent, so if they come at me, I can turn it aside with the long edge or just push it aside with the short edge. If I'm coming over and say I'm being attacked on this side, turn my short edge into them, my point into them with a bit of a crump, make a strike, okay? So this means that as I'm entering against my opponent, I'm putting my point right in the center, okay, so that I can drive that off, drive any attacks that they're going to make at me during that entering away, okay? So, over we go. So, throw your plunge, turn into a thrust. Throw your plunge, turn into a thrust. Throw your plunge, turn into a thrust. Over and over. Cool. And once you feel comfortable with that, that turn happens very quickly and really, really drives your opponents away from them, parries them really, really nicely. Once you're comfortable with that, here, and strike. Cool. So this is leading up to the idea, and we're going to talk a lot about this term, of unsetzen. So the idea that we put our point out and we're going to sort of leverage our opponent open. We're going to enter behind that point, which is going to provide both an active defense and offense. Cool? So from each of our guards, into the plunge and then turn the long edge. Into the plunge and then turn your edge against it. Into the plunge and then wind, turn against it. Okay, so this is the last point I want to make about using the Sturz or using the plunge, is that it allows us to deceive, it presents that threat of the point. And hence, once we've got that threat in play, it allows us just to deceive our opponents really, really readily from there. Okay, so if I am going to throw my point over and then strike, that is a much more difficult action to read than strike, back. Okay, much, much more difficult for my opponent to read. It also allows me to come in through measure pretty safe. I come in through my Sturz, I make my strike, I strike to the other side, okay? Come in through your Sturz, strike, strike, okay? So what you're doing is you're coming, bring that Sturz in, if you're in between you and your opponent. If they attack you, you can drive them away with setting aside, crooked, slicing, you know, all of those sorts of things. However, if not, then you can attack to their openings with deceiving. Okay, so the very first one, my favorite one, is I have thrown my point over. I'm going to make a little disengage and come around to the other side. So once I've gotten my point over, if he's responded to it, I could just disengage and come through the other side. So this is changing, and you can change into a cut, you could change into a thrust very readily from here. I go 1, 2. I go out, fail, hit. Out, disengage my point, so coming through the hanging, and from here, you can go to either side of your opponent. Sturzhauw to this side, out, disengage, step off, strike with a short edge to the other side. Let's give you a front-on view of that. So, I am making my Sturz, dropping my point, stepping off to hit with the short edge on the other side, okay? So I'll all sort of come around them, hit with the point. I'm going under, dropping my point, stepping further around with a triangle, hitting them on each side. That is a great fun drill to practice. We'll go 1, 2. 1, 2. And see how similar the movements are. So it's very easy to confuse the eye with what you're doing. 1, 2. 1, 2. Recover. Go to the other side. 1, 2. 1, drop the point. Drop the point, and from here we can strike out or continue that rotation. And when we throw in these little circular motions, as long as I keep my point in center as I'm doing that, I'm pretty safe as I'm entering. So we can throw in these little circular motions, and that really is going to disguise where I'm going to someone here. Oh. And you should by now be able to use failing and running off and flicking to go into all of their openings. So continue on and finish up with that. Okay, so into your sturts, dropping the point, and then failing and flowing off to all of the 4 openings. Cool. And that has given you plenty to work on this week. Hope you enjoy, guys. Really, really, really hope to see you all again soon.